Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins, where we have China's strategic plans for the future, something that they've actually been at for a very long time, and they definitely look long-term. Tough words between Russia and the United States, both those ambassadors speaking at the UN recently, and President Trump's announcement regarding the U.S. launching airstrikes on Syria in the wake of what is being said Syria's use of chemical weapons yet once again. But first, we're going to start off with China's influence is growing amidst its investments in other countries, along with its continuous building of roads connecting its country to other countries to increase GDP and importable resources within Asia and its surrounding neighbors. Well, let's take a look at this video explaining what's known as the Belt Road Initiative.
There's a new highway in Pakistan and a new rail terminal in Kazakhstan. A seaport in Sri Lanka recently opened, as well as this bridge in rural Laos. What's interesting is that they're all part of one country's project that spans 3 continents and touches over 60% of the world's population. If you connect the dots, it's not hard to see which country that is. This is China's Belt and Road Initiative, the most ambitious infrastructure project in modern history that's designed to reroute global trade, and it's how China plans to become the world's next superpower. It's 2013, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is giving a speech in Kazakhstan, where he mentions the ancient Silk Road, a network of trade routes that spread goods, ideas, and culture across Europe, the Middle East, and China as far back as 200 BC. He then says,
"We should take an innovative approach and jointly build an economic belt along the Silk Road."
A month later, Xi is in Indonesia.
The two sides should work together to build up a new maritime road in the 21st century.
These two phrases were the first mentions of Xi's legacy project, the multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. They're also the two components of the plan. There's an overland economic belt of 6 corridors that serve as new routes to get goods in and out of China, like this railroad connecting China to London, and these gas pipelines from the Caspian Sea to China, and a high-speed train network in Southeast Asia. Then there's the Maritime Silk Road, a chain of seaports stretching from the South China Sea to Africa that also directs trade to and from China. The BRI also includes oil refineries, industrial parks, power plants, mines, and fiber optic networks, all designed to make it easier for the world to trade with China. So far, over 60 countries have reportedly signed agreements for these projects. And the list is growing because China promotes it as a win-win for everyone. Take, for example, the BRI's flagship project, Pakistan. Like many countries in Central and South Asia, Pakistan has a stagnant economy and a corruption problem. It wasn't a popular place for foreign investment, that is until China came along. In 2001, China offered to build a brand new port in the small fishing town of Gwadar. By 2018, the port, as well as a highway and railway networks, became a $62 billion corridor within the BRI. It's where the economic belt meets the Maritime Silk Road, and it seemed to benefit both countries. Pakistan saw its highest GDP growth in 8 years and forged a tight relationship with a major world power. China, on the other hand, secured a new alternative route for goods, especially oil and gas from the Middle East. Through projects like these, it also found a way to boost its economy. Chinese construction companies that had fewer opportunities within their own country saw a huge boost from BRI contracts. 7 out of the 10 biggest construction firms in the world are now Chinese. What tips the balance in China's favor even more is a requirement that it be involved in building these projects. In Pakistan, for example, Chinese workers have directly built projects like this highway here, and a Chinese firm has worked with locals on a railway here in Serbia. China's involvement is one of its very few demands, and that's set these deals apart so far. See, typically, to get investment from the West, countries have to meet strict ethical standards. But China's offered billions of dollars, mostly in loans, with far fewer conditions. So it's no surprise the BRI has been a big hit with the less democratic countries in the region. China has signed agreements with authoritarian governments, military regimes, and some of the most corrupt countries in the world. It's even affiliated with Afghanistan, Ukraine, Yemen, and Iraq, all currently splintered by conflict. Because of China's willingness to loan money to unreliable countries, many experts have called the BRI a risky plan. Eventually, these countries will have to pay China back, but corruption and conflict make that payback unlikely. A recent report found that many of the countries indebted to China are very vulnerable, including 8 that are at high risk of being unable to pay. So why does China keep lending? Because there's more to the BRI than just economics. In Sri Lanka, China loaned about $1.5 billion for a new deepwater port. It was a key stop on the maritime Silk Road. By 2017, it was clear Sri Lanka couldn't pay back the loan, so instead they gave China control of the port as part of a 99-year lease. China also controls the strategic port in Pakistan, where it has a 40-year lease. It's pushing for a similar agreement in Myanmar, and it just opened an actual Chinese naval base in Djibouti. These are all signs of what's been called the string of pearls theory. It predicts that China is trying to establish a string of naval bases in the Indian Ocean that will allow it to station ships and guard shipping routes that move through the region. So while China's not getting its money back, it's still achieving some very important strategic goals. China's growing influence challenges the status of the US, which has been the world's lone superpower for the last several decades. But isolation is trending in the US, meaning that they are investing less and therefore losing influence around the world. The BRI is China's way of leveraging power to become a global leader. By building relationships and taking control of global trade, China's well on its way.
Well, very interesting that they went to something that they had, hundreds, thousands of years ago, still using it today, and certainly seeming very effective.
That's right.
Well, continuing in China, being the world's second largest oil consumer, importing 381 million tons of crude oil in 2016 alone, there are already 2 benchmarks for oil futures in the U.S. and the U.K. China's capital market is more open for foreign investors. Analysts say that crude oil futures would be very attractive to China's retail investors compared to other commodities items. Now, crude prices are most affected by policies and major geopolitical events.
So maybe China's hoping that with having their own futures in dealing with crude oil, they'll be able to better predict prices for one of their largest commodities of consumption there. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that foreign ambassadors have a crucial role to play in chaotic times at a welcoming ceremony for new envoys to Moscow. During his speech, he said that the situation in the world is becoming more chaotic. Nevertheless, we still hope that common sense will prevail and international relations will enter a constructive course and the entire world system will become more stable and predictable.
Both U.S. and Russian ambassadors had some strong words for each other regarding each other's activities in the world, mostly in the Middle East, at a recent UN Security Council meeting. Now let's take a look at this video courtesy of RT to see what they had to say.
We recall a rhetorical question which the Russian president put forward in 2015 from the United Nations General Assembly to our Western partners, above all the United States, concerning their reckless geopolitical experiments in the Middle East. Do you understand now what you have done? And the response at that time hung in the air. But there is a response. No, you do not understand, just as you fail to understand what you are doing now. The lack of a clear strategy on any issue is appalling not just to us. It confounds not only us. This is confounding to the majority of those seated here. But they have decided not to openly put this forward to you, following you everywhere you go, regardless of everything you touch. Chaos is left behind. Following you everywhere you go, regardless of everything you touch. Chaos is left behind. In the brackish waters of which you try to take out something, but only mutant fish are being taken out. I will put another rhetorical question forward. Do you understand the dangerous threshold towards which you are bringing the world? Do you understand the dangerous threshold towards which you are bringing the world? One of the areas where there's hostility that is most stark, that is on Syria. The terrorists and extremists supported by external sponsors are enduring a defeat there. Let us recall that we are talking about those terrorists and extremists who you supplied, financed, and deployed in the country to oust a legitimate government. And now it is clear why this is causing hysteria among those who invested political and material capital in these dark forces.
I started to listen to my Russian friend and respond. But instead, I'm in awe, Vasily, of how you say what you say with a straight face. I really, really am. Today's session of the Security Council has been called under truly strange circumstances. The Russian Federation has asked us to discuss what it calls unilateral threats related to Syria. What is strange is that Russia is ignoring the real threat to international peace and security that has brought us all here. If Russia had lived up to its commitment, there would be no chemical weapons in Syria, and we would not be here today. That is the Russian record of unilateralism. It is a record that has led to the trashing of all international standards against the use of chemical weapons. This meeting should not be about the so-called unilateral threats. It should be about the multiple actions Russia has taken to bring us to this point. Our president has not yet made a decision about possible actions in Syria. But should the United States and our allies decide to act in Syria, it will be in defense of a principle on which we all agree. It will be in defense of a bedrock international norm that benefits all nations.
Definitely some very strong words coming from the Russian ambassador to Nikki Haley, Ambassador Haley, and he's definitely taking a stance on what he perceives the United States is doing to the world right now.
Right. Kind of unsettling coming from two of the world's biggest superpowers and how they're going back and forth.
That's right. Well, Russia is working to de-escalate the possibility of an airstrike by the U.S. in Syria after what the U.S. said was another chemical attack on the people of Syria, called for by, of course, President Bashar al-Assad. Well, President Trump did make the statement that a possible airstrike may be launched in retaliation for attacks, but in a recent tweet, the U.S. president said that he didn't say when it might be launched. Although Russia is working to intervene, there are no plans for President Putin to talk directly to President Trump.
David Martin, a CBS News national security correspondent, said in a recent interview with CBS News regarding the pending strike against the Assad regime, he said that there needs to be convincing evidence for a strike to be launched, but not necessarily a smoking gun. Currently, there is no evidence linking Assad to chemical weapons, not now or in the past. In fact, in the last strike, all there was convincing circumstantial evidence. So still nothing concrete about even the last attack, and now they're ready to do the missile launch for this current attack.
But still not really having anything concrete. Yeah. Well, the French president says that he has proof linking Assad to the use of chemical weapons. Martin said that although the U.S. and France are working together and sharing intelligence, one country may look at circumstantial evidence as proof, while another country may say that's definitely circumstantial, but it's not a smoking gun.
Well, Russia has come to a completely different conclusion on the most recent attack in Syria. Russian ambassador to the European Union, Vladimir Chizov, spoke with Euronews Bureau out of Brussels. The ambassador responded to the suggestion that Russia is not shocked, as the rest of the world is, by the recent chemical weapons attack on Duma, which is in eastern Ghouta near Damascus.
Ambassador Chizov said Russia is shocked by, quote, yet another provocation of so-called chemical attack. He continued, Russian military specialists have visited the region, walked on those streets, entered those houses, talked to local doctors, and visited the only functioning hospital in Duma, including its basement, where reportedly the mountains of corpses pile up.
As a result of those visits, he said there were no corpses found, and not even one person came into the hospital for treatment after the attack. He insisted there was no chemical attack in Duma, just another, quote, staged event, unquote, with specially trained people to make it look as though it was real. He said, like some of the staged events by the White Helmets. It's amazing you can have such a different take on the same event.
Yeah. I mean, and the fact that you have representatives in the country right there who are able to go immediately into the area that was supposedly attacked with chemical weapons, just walk freely in the streets, taking video, visiting hospitals, talking to doctors, and it's like day and night.
Right.
Yeah. But regardless of concrete proof that the attack was real, a strike by America against Assad seems to be looming. When asked if Russia was prepared for such a retaliation where its own citizens might be injured or killed, Mr. Chizov replied, Russia has warned U.S. representatives publicly, as well as through the proper channels, over the grave consequences that could arise if the strike happens, and whether deliberately or otherwise, Russian citizens are hurt.
Well, tensions have been quickly rising across the globe over the latest Syrian development. President Trump tweeted in response to one Russian official who vowed Moscow would shoot down any missiles aimed at Syria.
The president's tweet read, Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming, nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. Wow.
However, Defense Secretary James Mattis isn't saying Assad's government is behind the chemical attack just yet. He claims the U.S. and its allies are still looking at intelligence. But regardless of any ongoing investigations, it seems the White House and everyone else who has a say is pointing the finger at the Syrian leader.
Well, England's Prime Minister Theresa May told reporters the use of chemical weapons cannot go unchallenged. They and their neighbor France agree they need to take action.
CBS News analyst and retired U.S. Admiral James Stavridis is referring to Trump's tweet. In referring to the tweet, he said, there is no advantage to revealing that a strike is coming, and there's no advantage in taunting Russia, because the worst outcome in this upcoming scenario would be direct military conflict between the United States and Russia.
And if on cue, Jeff, the president publicly announced that very thing, that he authorized a military operation in retaliation for the alleged, we're still the alleged, the circumstantial evidence, chemical attack in Duma. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what the president had to say.
My fellow Americans, a short time ago, I ordered the United States Armed Forces to launch precision strikes on targets associated with the chemical weapons capabilities of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. A combined operation with the armed forces of France and the United Kingdom is now underway. We thank them both. Following the horrors of World War I a century ago, civilized nations joined together to ban chemical warfare. Chemical weapons are uniquely dangerous not only because they inflict gruesome suffering, but because even small amounts can unleash widespread devastation. The purpose of our actions tonight is to establish a strong deterrent against the production, spread, and use of chemical weapons. Establishing this deterrent is a vital national security interest of the United States. The combined American, British, and French response to these atrocities will integrate all instruments of our national power, military, economic, and diplomatic. We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents. I also have a message tonight for the two governments most responsible for supporting, equipping, and financing the criminal Assad regime. To Iran and to Russia, I ask, what kind of a nation wants to be associated with the mass murder of innocent men, women, and children? The nations of the world can be judged by the friends they keep. The nations of the world can be judged by the friends they keep. The nations of the world can be judged by the friends they keep. In 2013, President Putin and his government promised the world that they would guarantee the elimination of Syria's chemical weapons. Assad's recent attack and today's response are the direct result of Russia's failure to keep that promise. Russia must decide if it will continue down this dark path or if it will join with civilized nations as a force for stability and peace. Hopefully someday we'll get along with Russia and maybe even Iran, but maybe not. I will say this, the United States has a lot to offer. With the greatest and most powerful economy in the history of the world. In Syria, the United States, with but a small force being used to eliminate what is left of ISIS, is doing what is necessary to protect the American people. Over the last year, nearly 100% of the territory once controlled by the so-called ISIS Caliphate in Syria and Iraq has been liberated and eliminated. The United States has also rebuilt our friendships across the Middle East. We have asked our partners to take greater responsibility for securing their home region, including contributing large amounts of money, for the resources, equipment, and all of the anti-ISIS effort. Increased engagement from our friends, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, and others, can ensure that Iran does not profit from the eradication of ISIS. America does not seek an indefinite presence in Syria. As other nations step up their contributions, we look forward to the day when we can bring our warriors home, and great warriors they are. Looking around our very troubled world, Americans have no illusions. We cannot purge the world of evil or act everywhere there is tyranny. No amount of American blood or treasure can produce lasting peace and security in the Middle East. It's a troubled place. We will try to make it better, but it is a troubled place. In the last century, we look straight into the darkest places of the human soul. We saw the anguish that can be unleashed and the evil that can take hold. So today, the nations of Britain, France, and the United States of America have marshaled their righteous power against barbarism and brutality.
Interesting. You know, one of the factors that I don't really think that both parties, or at least one of the parties, are not considering is the fact that the people are the ones suffering as a result of this. And what we're seeing a lot is it seems as though our leaders are quick to act before they investigate, kind of guilty until proven innocent. Let's just go based off of circumstantial evidence instead of having concrete proof that this was actually committed by the leader of Syria.
Right, and Russia seems to be fairly cool-headed regarding the whole situation. They don't, you know, they're saying, look, no chemical attack took place, you know, and just like the last chemical attack, if you're saying that it did take place, why don't you send an independent team in there to investigate and get the proof? But once again, the U.S. is, says no. You know, we're gonna go ahead and attack, and I guess you know, whatever proof is going to be wiped out at that point, which you know they weren't finding any to begin with. So
yeah, and it's interesting that this series of events taking place in Syria, you've got both the United States, Russia, and of course allies of the United States in that area. You know, Syria is kind of the tipping point for what many are saying is an impending war between the United States, its allies, and Russia.
Right, and even as President Trump just mentioned, Iran in there. So you know, Iran is still a key player in this whole battle, so to speak, as well.
That's right. Well, interestingly enough, Yisrael Hawkins did write about some of these things that are shown in Bible prophecies in the books, The Mark of the Beast. He has, I believe, 2 volumes, Volume 1 and Volume 2, which would be of great benefit for anybody who's interested in kind of learning how these current events are tying into Bible prophecy. And of course, you can contact the House of Yahweh for more of that information. Of course, request the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. This is how you can do that. You can write the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh by typing in info@yahweh.com. And of course, for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And don't forget the best free, of course, study tool to the Holy Scriptures, the Yisrael Says and the Ask Yisrael program. You can find those online by simply typing in YisraelSays.com or AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrael Hawkins bringing you proof that you can count on. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.